Welcome to this captivating story of love, betrayal, redemption, and the enduring power of family. It all begins on a scorching summer afternoon, where the Ferreira family seeks refuge in their lush garden, but beneath the surface, tensions simmer. Little Bea, full of innocence and joy, plays near the pool, unaware of the dangers lurking nearby. Her father, Enrique, a man of authority, enjoys a moment of solace, while his wife, Cecilia, basks in the sun with an air of cold indifference. But in a heartbeat, everything changes. A moment of excitement turns to terror as Bea tumbles into the pool, and the true nature of those around her is revealed. What follows is a heart-wrenching journey filled with pain, loss, and ultimately, a powerful transformation that will leave you inspired. From the depths of despair to the heights of joy, this story takes you through a roller coaster of emotions, showing how love, forgiveness, and the courage to do what's right can lead to the most unexpected and beautiful outcomes. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. On a searing summer afternoon, when the heat seemed to wrap around everything like a suffocating blanket, the Ferreira family retreated into the sanctuary of their lush, expansive garden. The air was thick with a stifling warmth that only added to the undercurrent of tension that lingered between them. Enrique, the proud and stern patriarch of the Ferreira clan, found refuge beneath the cool shadow of the ornate gazebo. He was draped in a luxurious robe that spoke volumes about his status and command, the fabric soft against his skin yet emblematic of the authority he wielded. His eyes, hidden behind a dark blindfold, gave him an air of mystery and detachment, though it was a sight he had long since lost. He lifted a delicate porcelain cup to his lips, savoring the bitter warmth of the freshly brewed coffee that offered a small, yet comforting, respite from the intensity of the day. Across the garden, basking in the relentless rays of the afternoon sun, sat Cecilia, Enrique's wife. Her beauty was undeniable, an almost blinding spectacle against the backdrop of green, as if she were a sun goddess descended to earth. Reclined elegantly on her sun bed, she exuded an effortless grace that seemed almost calculated. Her figure, flawless and enviable, was further accentuated by the way she held a shimmering cocktail in one perfectly manicured hand, the glass catching the light in a way that made it sparkle like a precious jewel. The sun's golden beams caressed her skin, playing upon her long, dawn-like eyelashes as she brushed them lazily, a picture of serene perfection. Yet beneath this surface of placid elegance, a coldness lurked, a chill that was as much a part of her as the warmth of the day was to the garden around her. Not far from this scene of adult composure and tension, a stark contrast could be found in the exuberance of youth. Little Bea, Enrique's lively and spirited stepdaughter, was the embodiment of childhood innocence and energy. She skipped along the edge of the sparkling pool, her laughter ringing out like a bell, its joyful sound echoing through the otherwise tense atmosphere of the garden. Her curly brown hair bounced with each step, and her rosy cheeks glowed with a healthy flush of youth. In her hand, she clutched a small net, chasing after a vibrant butterfly that flitted just out of her reach, its delicate wings painted in the most vivid hues. The creature seemed almost to mock her with its graceful, effortless movements, leading her in a merry chase around the pool. But the spell of joy was soon broken. Bea, stop that nonsense right now. Can't you sit still for just 5 minutes? You're always causing trouble. Cecilia's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold like a winter wind, filled with barely concealed irritation. The reprimand was harsh and sudden, and it hung in the air like a blade. Bea, accustomed as she was to such sharp words, didn't even flinch. Her heart, though tender and easily bruised, had grown used to the sting of such rebukes, to the absence of affection from the woman who should have been a mother to her. Instead, she continued her playful pursuit, her small face set in determination as she reached out for the elusive butterfly. The butterfly, with a mind of its own, chose that moment to soar upwards, its wings catching the sunlight in a dazzling display of color that made it look like a flying gem. Captivated by the beauty of the moment, Bea's small fingers fumbled to retrieve her phone from her bag, eager to capture the perfect shot of the ethereal creature. She edged closer to the pool, her eyes locked on her target, completely unaware of the danger she was placing herself in. In her excitement, she took one step too far, her foot slipping on the wet tiles. With a startled cry, she tumbled headfirst into the cool, clear water below. The world seemed to slow for an instant as she fell, the shimmering surface of the pool rising to meet her. Panic gripped Bea the moment she hit the water. The coolness that had seemed so inviting moments before now felt like a shock to her system, her small body flailing in the sudden, terrifying cold. Her mind went blank with fear, her limbs thrashing as she struggled to keep her head above water. "Dad! Dad! Help me!" she screamed, her voice trembling with sheer terror, the innocence of her earlier playfulness gone in an instant. The cry of distress pierced through the air, reaching Enrique's ears with an urgency that jolted him from his seat. His heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps as he struggled to orient himself in the darkness that had been his world for so long. Blind and disoriented, he pushed himself to his feet, hands outstretched as he desperately tried to find his daughter, Cecilia. "For heaven's sake, help her. I can't see where do I go." His voice was thick with desperation, pleading for the one person he trusted to come to their child's aid. But Cecilia remained where she was, unmoved by the urgency in her husband's voice. Her irritation simmered just beneath the surface, masked by a thin veneer of calm indifference. She barely stirred from her relaxed position, her eyes half-lidded as she took another sip of her cocktail. "I told her to stay put. Let this be a lesson to her," she murmured, her voice as cold as the ice in her glass, barely lifting a finger in her daughter's defense. There was no rush to her movements, no urgency in her tone, just a quiet, almost cruel detachment that left Enrique stumbling in the darkness, helpless and panicked. It was Pedro, the Ferreira family's devoted gardener, who finally broke the stillness. He had been tending to the far end of the garden, his hands busy with the lawn mower. But the moment he heard Bea's cries for help, he abandoned his work and sprinted towards the pool with the speed of a man driven by pure instinct. Without a moment's hesitation, he dove into the water, his strong arms cutting through the cool blue as he reached the terrified child. With a firm yet gentle grip, he pulled Bea from the water's embrace, lifting her to safety. Gasping and trembling, Bea clung to him for a moment, before breaking free and running into her father's waiting arms. Her small body shook with sobs, her fear still raw and palpable as she buried her face against Enrique's chest. "Dad, I was so scared. I just wanted to take a picture of the butterfly, and now my phone is ruined. I didn't mean to make such a mess." Enrique's voice softened immediately, his blindfold concealing the relief and deep love he felt for his stepdaughter. His hands gently stroked her wet hair as he spoke, each word laced with tenderness. "Hush now, my dear. The phone can be replaced. What matters most is that you're safe. Go inside, dry off, and please be more careful next time. You gave your old dad quite a scare." His words were a balm to Bea's frayed nerves, the warmth in his voice wrapping around her like a protective blanket. But this display of affection only served to ignite Cecilia's fury. Her eyes flashed with contempt as she rose from her sunbed, her voice rising with a venomous edge. "You're too soft. She disobeyed you, nearly drowned, and destroyed an expensive gadget, and yet you coddle her. Pathetic." The disdain in her voice was unmistakable, her anger flaring like a wildfire, consuming any warmth that might have lingered in the air. The garden, once a place of refuge and beauty, had become a battlefield of emotions, where love and resentment clashed in a silent, unseen war. Enrique's patience, long tested and worn thin, finally snapped. His voice, usually calm and measured, cut through Cecilia's tirade like a blade through silence. How dare you speak like that? She could have drowned, and you just sat there doing nothing. If it weren't for Pedro, Bea might not be here now. She's just a child, Cecilia my child, and she's already endured more loss than most adults could bear. Losing her mother was a devastating blow, and I love her with all my heart. If you want to remain part of this family, you'll have to accept that. Do you honestly think that if you had your own child, they wouldn't run, play, and make mistakes? I'm hiring a nanny, and that's final. The process has already begun. But managing all of this on my own has been overwhelming. Cecilia, sensing she had overstepped, quickly adjusted her tone, the sharp edges of her voice softening as she attempted to calm the growing storm. Enrique, darling, I'm just overwhelmed. I love you, but I can't be expected to care for Bea all day. I have my routines, my workouts, my spa appointments, my beauty treatments. Your business and your daughter have become my responsibility, and yes, I agree. We do need a nanny. It will lighten the load for everyone. But for now, I must go. I have a manicure appointment and a massage. I love you, don't miss me too much, she added with a practiced smile, leaning in to brush her lips against his cheek before turning away. As Cecilia departed, the tension in the air seemed to lift, replaced by a palpable sense of relief that washed over little Bea. She clung tightly to her father, her small hands gripping him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that often felt confusing and cold. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Why is Cecilia so mean? She doesn't love me, and I don't think you see it. I miss Mom so much. She was always so kind. Bea's voice was soft, tinged with a sadness that belied her young age. Enrique sighed deeply, his heart heavy with the burden of both grief and love. He held his daughter close, wishing he could shield her from every harsh word, every painful memory. I miss her too, my sweet angel. Your mother was the best woman I ever knew, kind, gentle, and loving. She's watching over us from heaven now. As for Cecilia, she isn't all bad, it just takes time for us all to adjust. But I promise you this, you will get to choose your nanny. In fact, another candidate should be arriving soon, he assured her, his voice gentle and reassuring. Bea, her spirits lifted slightly by her father's promise, kissed his weathered cheek, her soft lips a fleeting comfort against the storm of emotions swirling within him. With a small, sad smile, she dashed off, her laughter, though tinged with lingering sorrow, echoing through the sunlit yard as she escaped into the familiar comfort of her toys scattered across the garden. Left alone in the quiet aftermath, Enrique closed his eyes, the weight of his memories pressing heavily on his heart. As the silence enveloped him, Enrique's thoughts drifted back to Vanessa, his first love, the woman who had once been his everything. She had been beautiful, graceful, and the epitome of a loving wife and mother. Vanessa had come from a respectable family, but what had truly mattered to Enrique was the deep, unwavering love she had for him. Together they had been living a fairy tale, their lives intertwined in perfect harmony. But life, with its unpredictable and often cruel twists, had other plans for them. 2 years ago, their idyllic life had been shattered by an unrelenting and incurable genetic disease that claimed Vanessa's life. It had all started shortly after she gave birth to their beloved daughter, Bea. At first, it was just her eyesight that began to fade, a small concern that quickly spiraled into something much more sinister. Her memory started to slip away, followed by the devastating loss of control over her limbs. Vanessa, once so full of life and vitality, was confined to a bed, her body betraying her as it slowly withered away. The woman who had been the light of Enrique's life was fading before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Each day became a relentless battle against the inevitable. Enrique watched in helpless agony as the disease ravaged the woman he loved. He prayed endlessly, his tears flowing freely as he begged for a miracle that never came. Despite spending a fortune on the best medical care available, nothing could halt the cruel progression of her illness. When Vanessa finally passed, The void she left behind was so vast, so all-consuming, that Enrique feared it would swallow him whole. The loss was unbearable, and even now, the pain lingered, a constant ache that time had not dulled. Bea, too young to fully understand the magnitude of her loss, had retreated into a world of sorrow, mourning her mother with a depth of grief that no child should ever have to endure. Enrique had tried to be strong for her, to fill the gaping hole left by Vanessa's absence, but the task had been monumental, leaving him drained and often overwhelmed. For a long time, Enrique was convinced that he would never love again, that the part of his heart capable of such deep affection had died along with Vanessa. But fate, in its unpredictable way, had other plans. One evening, during what was supposed to be a routine business dinner at a bustling restaurant, his eyes had fallen on Cecilia. She had been radiant, sitting at a nearby table with a friend, a martini in hand, her laughter filling the room with a kind of lightness that Enrique hadn't felt in years. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, transforming from a simple business engagement into a night of unexpected joy. There was music, there was laughter, and eventually there was dancing. As they swayed to the soft melodies, Enrique had felt an irresistible pull toward Cecilia's beauty, a force that rendered him powerless to resist. That night had marked the beginning of their whirlwind romance, a love story that had escalated quickly, culminating in their marriage. But as Enrique sat there now, in the quiet of the garden, he couldn't help but wonder if he had made a mistake. The love he had once felt so strongly for Cecilia had faded into something far more complicated, tinged with doubt and regret. He loved Bea with all his heart, and he knew that she deserved a mother's love, something that Cecilia had not yet been able to give. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden, Enrique sighed deeply, the weight of his choices pressing heavily on his shoulders. He knew that the days ahead would be filled with challenges, but he vowed to do whatever it took to protect his daughter, to ensure that she would never feel unloved or unwanted. No matter what, he would be there for her, just as Vanessa would have wanted. Cecilia moved into his home, asserting herself as the new mistress of the house with ease and confidence. She took charge, delegating tasks to the staff and organizing the household with the precision of someone born to lead. However, there was one area where she failed miserably: her relationship with Bea. From the outset, there was friction between stepmother and stepdaughter, a mutual animosity that only grew with time. Enrique initially chalked it up to childish jealousy, certain that Bea would eventually come to accept Cecilia. But as 2 years passed with no sign of improvement, the tension between them only worsened, erupting into frequent arguments that left the household in a perpetual state of unease. Then, just 2 weeks ago, the unimaginable happened. Timoto, Enrique's loyal driver, requested time off for personal reasons, leaving Enrique to drive himself to work that fateful day. It was late when he finally left the office, his mind preoccupied with the day's events as he made his way to his car in the dimly lit parking lot. Out of nowhere, 3 shadowy figures attacked him from behind, their intentions clear and menacing. Enrique fought back with every ounce of strength he had, but one of the assailants sprayed pepper spray directly into his eyes, blinding him with a burning agony. A passing police car sent the attackers fleeing, but the damage had been done. The pain in his eyes was excruciating, and Enrique was left teetering on the edge of blindness. Now he was forced to wear dark sunglasses or an eye patch, his vision a mere shadow of what it once was as he underwent intensive treatment. The doctors had warned him that if the medication failed, surgery would be the only option left to restore his sight, a glimmer of hope, but one fraught with uncertainty. This ordeal had rendered Enrique almost completely incapacitated, confining him to his home, where he now managed his business remotely. He held meetings with partners via online conferences, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but the weight of his circumstances bore down on him heavily. What haunted Enrique most was the gnawing question of who could have harbored such animosity toward him. He had not been involved in any severe conflicts for years, and yet someone had gone to great lengths to harm him. This mystery, coupled with his deteriorating vision, left him in a state of constant anxiety. Each day was a battle not just with his physical limitations, but with the gnawing suspicion that somewhere, someone was still out to get him. Now, as he tried to steer his company from the confines of his home, Enrique was forced to confront not only his past and present fears, but also the uncertain future that lay ahead. To his surprise, Cecilia had quickly immersed herself in the business, diving into it with a fervor that caught Enrique off guard. Just as he was lost in thought, reflecting on his wife's unexpected involvement, a soft, pleasant voice broke through his reverie. "Excuse me, are you Enrique Ferreira? My name is Marlene. I'm here for the nanny position. My appointment was set for noon." Enrique's lips curled into a gentle smile. Though he couldn't see the young woman who stood before him, there was something in her tone, warmth, sincerity that made him instinctively trust her. He held out his hand, feeling hers clasp his, and began to ask the questions that had weighed heavily on his mind. "Marlene, may I ask how old you are? How much experience do you have with children? Do you have recommendations from your previous job? And what is your educational background? I care deeply for my daughter and need to ensure that I'm choosing someone truly capable." Marlene hesitated, letting out a small sigh before responding. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Ferreira. To be honest, I don't have any formal recommendations. I'm only 23, and while I haven't worked extensively in this field, I adore children and am willing to work for a modest salary. I've already spent a little time with Bea, and she's an amazing girl. I promise I'll be there for her every step of the way." At that moment, Bea, sensing her father's uncertainty, ran over with bright eyes and an eager smile, her excitement palpable. She glanced at Marlene, giving her a playful wink before turning her attention to her father. "Dad, please choose Marlene. I really like her. And didn't you say I could pick the nanny this time? Remember." Enrique found himself caught in a dilemma. Marlene was undeniably young for such a role, with no significant experience or references to vouch for her. The prudent choice would be to seek someone more qualified, someone with a proven track record. Yet, there was something about Marlene, her sweet voice, her genuine affection for his daughter that made him pause. And, most importantly, Bea seemed to have taken an immediate liking to her, which was a rarity. After weighing the pros and cons, Enrique made his decision. "All right, Marlene," he said, his voice firm yet kind. "I'll give you a chance, but it will be on a trial basis. You can start immediately. Here's what I need from you. There's a schedule of dance and drawing classes that Bea needs to follow. Please make sure she attends them, help her with her homework. Ensure she's eating properly, and keep me informed of any changes in her health. Do you understand?" Tears of joy welled up in Marlene's eyes as she nodded eagerly. This opportunity meant the world to her, and she was determined to prove herself. "Thank you so much, Mr. Ferreira. I promise I'll give it my all." And so from that day forward, Marlene became a cherished member of the Ferreira household. She proved to be a natural at her job, winning over Bea's heart almost instantly. Unlike previous nannies, Marlene didn't resort to scolding or pressure. Instead, she treated Bea as a friend, someone to be encouraged and supported. Whenever Bea showed signs of laziness or reluctance to study, Marlene would cleverly turn the situation into a game. "Okay, let's make a deal," she would say with a mischievous grin. "Whoever finishes their task faster and better gets the biggest, yummiest vanilla ice cream. But the loser, well, they'll have to eat oatmeal porridge for 2 days straight. And between you and me, I can't stand oatmeal porridge. What about you?" With that, Marlene had found a way to not only motivate Bea but also to bring joy into the little girl's daily routine, creating a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. Whenever Bea felt slighted, she would furiously scribble out angry letters of the alphabet, determined to outshine Marlene and escape the dreaded punishment of eating bland, unappetizing oatmeal porridge. Her competitive spirit was fierce, and she would do anything to avoid that tasteless dish. Enrique, watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief and contentment. His little girl was thriving academically, her spirits lifted by the positive influence of the new nanny. Each evening, she would bubble over with excitement, recounting the day's adventures with Marlene. Whether it was mastering the art of an intricate hairstyle or perfecting the delicate process of making macarons, Bea's eyes sparkled with newfound joy. Yet, not everyone in the household shared Enrique's happiness. Cecilia, always quick to criticize, could barely conceal her disdain. "You've chosen an odd nanny for Bea," she would complain, her tone dripping with disapproval. "She's not just audacious for her age, but she spoils Bea even more than you do. How can that be considered proper education? We need to be firmer with her, or she'll become too complacent. The girl used to at least react to me, even if it was with annoyance. Now, she just stays silent and follows Marlene around like a shadow." Enrique, weary of the constant negativity, responded with calm firmness, "No matter who we bring in, you'll find fault, dear. If Bea is disrespectful, you're unhappy. If she's quiet, it's still a problem. Perhaps it's not about the nanny or even Bea. Maybe you're just not interested in finding a way to connect with her." Cecilia pursed her lips, a look of frustration flashing across her face. She remained silent, but inside, her thoughts seethed with resentment. "Do whatever you want," she thought bitterly. "Just keep that irritating girl away from me. I'm exhausted from dealing with her." In the grand mansion, there stood a beautiful grand piano, a relic of Enrique's past when he was a passionate musician. Sometimes nostalgia would wash over him, and he would sit down to play, letting the melodies transport him back to a time filled with music and dreams. One evening, as he wandered through the house, he was caught off guard by the sound of delicate notes floating through the air. Following the music, he found Marlene seated at the piano, her fingers dancing gracefully across the keys. "Marlene," he said, pleasantly surprised, "I didn't know you played. I used to be a musician myself. Please play something else, I'd love to hear more." A soft blush crept up Marlene's cheeks as she looked up at him. "I'm not an expert," she admitted modestly. "I was fortunate to have a wonderful music teacher at the orphanage who saw something in me. He always said I had talent. I've always loved music, especially this melody. It resonates deeply with me." As Marlene began to play a slow, romantic tune, Enrique was transported to another time, another place. The music stirred something deep within him, awakening long-buried emotions. Tears welled up in his eyes and spilled down his cheeks as the memories of his youth came rushing back, each note tugging at his heartstrings. "Oh my God," he whispered to himself, almost in disbelief. "This is impossible." When the music finally stopped, Enrique was left in stunned silence. He turned to Marlene, his voice thick with emotion. "Where did you learn that melody? It's not something you can find anywhere. It was written by someone very dear to me." Marlene looked up at him with gentle eyes and replied, "A neighbor of mine, Ruth, taught me to play it. She's incredibly talented and kind, but she's been going through so much lately. Her son was taken from her, and she lost her job without any cause. She's fallen into a deep depression. And I've been doing my best to support her." The depth of Marlene's empathy touched Enrique even more than the music had. He felt a connection, not just to the melody, but to the young woman who had brought it to life, and to the kindness she extended to those around her. In that moment, Enrique realized there was much more to Marlene than met the eye, a depth of character that went far beyond her age or experience. Enrique's heart pounded in his chest, and a wave of dizziness made his legs feel as though they might give out beneath him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, and asked Marlene for more information. His voice trembled with urgency. "Marlene, tell me more about your neighbor. How old is she? What's her full name? And what about her son? Why was he taken from her? Marlene sighed deeply, the weight of the story heavy on her shoulders. Her name is Ruth Figueroa. She's around 30, but I didn't press her for details. Her son, Adam Astor, is 9 years old, a bright, thoughtful, and mature boy. I'm not sure if Ruth was ever married, and I don't know who Adam's father is. She once mentioned a first love that ended in tragedy, but she didn't say much more about it. She paused, her voice tinged with sorrow as she continued. Ruth used to work as a music teacher at a private school. She earned a decent salary, and by all accounts she was dedicated and hardworking. But then, the school's principal, an older man, married. With grandchildren, began to take an inappropriate interest in her. When Ruth didn't respond to his advances, he made her life unbearable. She had the courage to stand up to him, even reporting his behavior to his wife and the police. That's when things took a dark turn. One day, while Ruth and Adam were out, someone broke into their apartment. They left cigarette butts and empty whiskey bottles scattered around, making it look as though Ruth was living a life of neglect and debauchery. When Ruth returned home with her son, she found social services waiting for her, along with so-called witnesses who falsely accused her of not caring for Adam. Despite Ruth's protests, they took Adam away, claiming she was an unfit mother. But that's a complete lie. I've been to her apartment many times. It's always spotless. Ruth doesn't smoke, and she only drinks wine on special occasions. The whole thing has been a nightmare for her. She's been fighting to get Adam back, knocking on every authority's door, but it's been in vain. The principal used his influence to not only get her fired, but also to publicly humiliate her. Now, Ruth spends her days in despair, crying outside the orphanage where Adam is being held. He's suffering there too, begging to come home. They show happy children in orphanages on TV, but the reality is far from that. It breaks my heart to see them like this. I feel so helpless against that cruel, powerful man who destroyed my neighbor's life. Enrique listened in stunned silence, each word piercing his heart like a dagger. Tears welled up in his eyes, the sting of them almost unbearable as they spilled over and ran down his face. Everything Marlene had said fell into place with an almost terrifying clarity. He could hardly believe it, yet deep down, he knew it had to be true. His voice quivered as he struggled to speak. Marlene, please, I need you to bring Ruth here tomorrow. I need to see her, or at least hear her voice. We know each other, though it's a story that's long and complicated. But I need you to trust me and do this for me. Please. Marlene was taken aback by the intensity of his request but nodded in agreement. Okay, Mr. Ferreira. I'll come with her tomorrow morning if she's willing. But how should I explain this to her? She might be confused or hesitant. Enrique wiped the tears from his face and took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. Just tell her that an old friend wants to see her, that it's important. Tell her that she'll be safe here. Please, Marlene, I need to do this. Marlene gave a reassuring nod, though she was still puzzled by the sudden urgency in Enrique's request. I'll do my best to bring her here. I hope she'll agree. I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Ferreira. As she left the room, Enrique was left alone with his swirling thoughts and emotions. His mind raced as he tried to piece together what this all meant, the memories of his past mingling with the harsh reality of the present. His heart ached, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. Tomorrow he would see Ruth again, and maybe, just maybe, he could help her reclaim what she had lost. Enrique, his voice thick with emotion and his heart pounding, managed to say, "Just tell her Enrique is waiting for her." Marlene gave a brief nod before heading off to prepare lunch for Bea, leaving Enrique alone with the storm of emotions swirling inside him. As soon as the door clicked shut, he retreated to his study, locking the door behind him, as if to seal himself away from the world. Once alone, he collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. Memories, long buried and half forgotten, came rushing back with an intensity that nearly overwhelmed him. He remembered his youth vividly, how he had grown up with only his mother by his side, his father a shadowy figure he never knew, an explorer who had vanished into the wilds before Enrique could form a memory of him. Though the absence of his father left a void, Enrique learned to stop asking questions, finding solace in the one constant in his life: music. From a young age, he had been captivated by the melodies that flowed through the air, able to lose himself for hours in the sound. The turning point in his life came one day when he accompanied his mother on a visit to friends. As the adults chatted, 5-year-old Enrique found himself drawn to a grand piano in the corner of the room. Without hesitation, he climbed onto the bench and tentatively pressed a few keys. To everyone's amazement, he began to play a simple melody, his fingers moving instinctively as if they had been born to create music. His mother, recognizing the talent in her son, immediately enrolled him in music classes. It was there, on the very first day, that he met Ruth. Ruth was a vision to him, a pretty girl with large bows in her hair and a music folder clutched in her small hands. They sat together at the same desk, and from that moment on, they were inseparable. Their bond deepened over the years as they both enrolled in a prestigious music conservatory. Together, they celebrated their first successes, performing in concerts and dreaming of a future filled with music and love. But as the years passed, their childhood friendship blossomed into something more: a deep, passionate love. Ruth remained as she had always been, a dreamer who cared little for material possessions. Her heart beat for music, her soul resonated with every note, and she was content to live simply, as long as she could immerse herself in her art. But for Enrique, the realities of life began to press down on him. He longed for stability, for the comforts of a home, a car, nice clothes, and the ability to live without financial worry. After they completed their studies at the conservatory, Enrique made a decision that would change the course of their lives. Instead of continuing with his music, he turned his attention to business, eager to build a future that would provide the security he craved. But this choice led to tension and conflict between them, with arguments becoming more frequent. Ruth, desperate to pull him back from the path he was on, would plead with him. "What are you doing, Enrique? Don't give up on music, it's your gift. You're truly talented, and your fingers were made to play and create. Don't throw that away." But instead of feeling understood, Enrique felt increasingly frustrated and misunderstood. "Ruth, you're living in a fantasy," he would snap. "You're not from this world. Can't you see that we're struggling? How do you expect us to survive on the meager earnings from music? Concerts don't pay the bills anymore. I'm working to buy you those gold earrings. Need to make sure you're dressed well and have enough to eat. Any other girl would be thrilled with that. Instead of trying to teach me how to live, why don't you start tutoring and earn some real money?" The hurt in Ruth's eyes was unmistakable as she flung the earrings back at him. "Take them. They mean nothing if you're going to use them to hurt me. Maybe we should end this, Enrique. I don't even recognize you anymore. You've become so hard, so cold, and it breaks my heart. I've always wanted a simple, peaceful life filled with love, trust, and loyalty. Wealth means nothing to me. But you're obsessed with money. You disappear for days, your eyes are red from stress, and you've abandoned the music that once brought you so much joy. When was the last time you even touched the piano? And no, I won't tutor children just for money. I won't exploit them for financial gain." Enrique, his heart hardened by his ambition, dismissed her words with a wave of his hand. "Fine, Ruth, then go. Live your simple life if that's what you want. But remember this, you'll regret leaving me. I'll become a great businessman, and you'll see just how wrong you were." And with those cold words, they parted ways, the love they once shared buried beneath the rubble of broken dreams and unmet expectations. Now, all these years later, Enrique was confronted with the bitter memories of a choice that had cost him dearly. As he sat there, tears streaming down his face, he wondered if it was too late to make things right, or if the past had left wounds too deep to heal. But one thing was clear: he needed to see Ruth again, to face the consequences of his decisions and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to reconcile with the ghosts of his past. So, in a moment of heated argument and youthful stubbornness, they ended their relationship, parting ways without any real reason, their hearts bruised by pride and misunderstanding. Enrique, determined to prove himself, threw himself into his work, eventually opening a successful chain of mechanic shops. He toiled day and night, pushing memories of Ruth and their shared passion for music to the back of his mind. Life moved forward with relentless speed. He met Vanessa, married her, and together they had a daughter. The responsibilities of family life, coupled with the demands of running a business, consumed him entirely. In the chaotic whirlwind of life, there was no time to look back, no space to dwell on the past. But fate had a way of catching up. Years later, he crossed paths with Ruth once more, and all the emotions he thought he had buried came rushing back. Her charm, her essence, it all overwhelmed him. Even though he loved Cecilia, it wasn't the same as the pure, unfiltered joy he had once felt with Ruth, a joy intertwined with music and the innocence of first love. Now, as he sat there, listening to the melody from his youth, the very one Ruth had written, his heart ached with a longing so intense it was almost unbearable. A wild, uncontrollable desire overtook him. He needed to find Ruth again, to speak to her, heart to heart, regardless of how it might look or what it might mean for his current life. First love, after all, is never truly forgotten. It lives within a person's heart forever, a flame that never fully extinguishes. The anticipation for the next day was almost too much to bear. That night, Enrique could hardly sleep, his mind racing with thoughts of Ruth and what might come. By morning, he meticulously groomed himself, shaving carefully and dressing in his best clothes. He listened impatiently to Cecilia's usual morning chatter about clothes, gossip, and her salon appointments, barely able to contain his eagerness for her to leave. Finally, the moment arrived. When Marlene brought Bea back from school, she wasn't alone. Ruth was with her. Enrique could only make out a blurred silhouette, but the familiar scent of her floral perfume and the softness of her voice were unchanged, instantly transporting him back in time. Ruth's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "Enrique, is it really you? When Marlene told me yesterday that Enrique wanted to see me, I was shocked. You've changed so much. You've become strong and successful. What happened? Why did you want to see me? And why are you wearing that black band over your eyes? Are you ill?" Hearing her voice, her concern, the dam inside Enrique broke, and tears began to stream down his face. He reached out, taking Ruth's hand in his, feeling the familiar softness, the long, delicate fingers that were made for playing music. His voice was barely a whisper, laden with emotion. "My dear Ruth, I can't tell you how happy I am to see you, to breathe in your perfume again. We were such fools to end things back then, weren't we? You ask what happened to me. A few weeks ago, I was attacked. Some men sprayed pepper spray directly into my eyes. Now I'm almost blind. I can only make out vague shapes. The doctors say I need surgery, but that's not what matters right now. Marlene told me about your son, Adamastor. Ruth, please tell me the truth. Do we have a child together? Is he mine?" Ruth sighed, her voice soft and full of sorrow. "Yes, Enrique, Adamastor is your son. I've never been with another man but you. No matter how hard I tried to move on, I could never forget you. But they took my boy from me, Enrique. My heart is shattered. I can hardly sleep. I spend my days sitting outside the orphanage, praying he'll look out the window and see me. I don't know what I did to deserve this. I've never harmed anyone. That man who ruined my life, he's bribed everyone just to cause me pain. I'm so desperate. I'm almost willing to agree to his terms just to get Adam back. I feel like I have no other choice." Enrique's grip on her hand tightened, his voice rising with fierce determination. "Don't even think about it, Ruth. I will help you get our son back. Give me all the details you have, everything you know. I'll find the right people, I'll hire the best lawyers. Together. We'll take down that cruel man who's done this to you. I have connections in the police department. Do you remember Kyo? You won't believe it, but he's now a police captain. We'll get Adam back, I promise you. I won't let my son be lost to the system, wandering through orphanages. Trust me, Ruth. Everything will be all right. I've never met anyone like you, and now that I've found you again, I won't let you go. We'll fight this together." Ruth looked into Enrique's eyes, or where his eyes should have been behind the blindfold, and nodded, tears of relief and hope shining in her own. She had carried this burden for so long, but now, with Enrique by her side, she felt a glimmer of light piercing through the darkness. Together they would fight to bring their son home. Together they would reclaim the life they had once dreamed of, the life that had been so cruelly stolen from them. Ruth felt a glimmer of hope reignite within her. Desperate, and with no one else to turn to, Enrique reached out to Kyo, a friend from their distant past. Kyo, ever loyal, immediately offered his assistance, suggesting they orchestrate a daring sting operation. The plan was risky, but Ruth was resolute. Her mission was simple yet terrifying. She had to call the director, feign submission, and arrange a meeting. The catch was she would be wired, with the sole purpose of extracting a full confession from the man who had turned her life into a living nightmare, leading to his inevitable arrest. Ruth, gripped by a blend of fear and determination, knew she had no other choice. Her son's safety hung in the balance, and she was ready to confront the devil himself. Summoning every ounce of courage, she inhaled deeply and dialed the number with a trembling hand. When the line connected, she heard the director's vile voice, dripping with condescension. "Finally remembered me, scared little girl. Why are you calling?" A searing rage flared within Ruth, yet she forced herself to respond with a facade of calmness. "Gil, please, I'm begging you. Return my son to me. I'll do whatever you want. Just tell me when and where we can meet." He let out a cruel, mocking laugh. "Tomorrow, 6 p.m., my office. Don't be late, my sweet little bird." The bile rose in Ruth's throat at his repulsive words, but she swallowed it down. After regaining her composure, she dressed as elegantly as she could under the circumstances, carefully concealing the recording device. Her legs felt like they could give way at any moment, but she forced herself to move, one step at a time, toward the lion's den. The detective had warned her if things spiraled out of control, she should open the window as signal for them to storm in. With her heart pounding in her chest, Ruth knocked on the door and stepped into the office. The director sat there, exuding smugness, his eyes roaming over her with a predatory gleam. "Good evening, my little bird." He sneered, "I see life has treated you well, and you've blossomed beautifully. It's been too long. Come closer, let me drink you in." Ruth's blood ran cold, and she nearly faltered under the weight of his audacity. The fear of what he might try clawed at her insides, but she clung to the thought of Adam Astor and the police waiting outside. Summoning her last reserves of strength, she managed to mask her disgust with a veneer of civility, taking a sip of champagne and nibbling on sweets as she steeled herself. "Why rush things, Gil? We've got all night. Let's drink, relax." He seemed to enjoy her compliance, pouring the champagne with a smirk. But Ruth was done playing along. She looked him straight in the eye, her voice laced with barely contained urgency. "Gil, before we proceed any further, I need your word. Will you return my son to me? I know you're the one behind all of this. But what I can't understand is how you did it, how you managed to destroy my reputation so completely." Her heart pounded as she awaited his response, every nerve on edge, praying this gamble would bring her closer to freeing her son from the clutches of this monster. Giler's lips curled into a sinister smile. "You should have known better, my dear. Had you been more obedient from the start, none of this would have been necessary. No one defies me and gets away with it. Do you think my secretary and that gym teacher are just here out of goodwill? They've been far more accommodating than you. And now they're enjoying handsome salaries and generous bonuses. As for your predicament, it was rather simple to orchestrate. A good friend of mine, a well-connected individual, happens to hold a position in Child Protective Services. My financial backing helped her secure that job, and in return, she did me a favor. She arranged for your son to be placed in an orphanage. Meanwhile, I hired a few men and arranged for some witnesses to create the chaos in your apartment. Money, my dear, it makes the world go round. Believe it or not, I once loved you. But now, the more you satisfy me, the sooner you'll get your son back. So, are you ready now? Enough talking. Let's begin. Ruth's heart pounded in her chest as the gravity of Jeeler's words sunk in. She knew she couldn't delay any longer. Without hesitation, she made a beeline for the window, throwing it open in a desperate bid for help. Jeeler, proving unexpectedly swift for his age, lunged toward her with malevolent intent. Ruth instinctively shoved him away, her adrenaline-fueled strength surprising even herself. Enraged, Jeeler began to thrash about, sending everything on his desk crashing to the floor. "There's no one here. Not even the janitor," he spat venomously. "What are you thinking, fighting back like this? Have you lost your mind?" But before he could close in on her again, the flimsy door burst open, and the police stormed the room. In an instant, they subdued the director, wrenching him away from Ruth. "Shame on you," one officer scolded, his voice dripping with disdain. "At your age, behaving like this? You're a married man with grandchildren. How do you think they'll feel when they learn the truth?" Jeeler, struggling against his captors, screamed threats and curses. "You'll regret this. I have friends in the police, and they won't stand for this." But the officer remained calm, determined to see justice served. "We'll deal with that later. Now, tell us how you managed to steal this woman's child and cover your tracks." As the realization that it was finally over washed over her, Ruth felt her body tremble with relief. Tears streamed down her face as she handed the recording device to the officer, her voice quivering. "Please, bring Adamastor back to me. He confessed, didn't he? I did everything I was supposed to, right?" The officer nodded reassuringly, his tone gentle. "You did well. Don't worry, we'll get your son back. And as for that bragger," he cast a cold glance at Jeeler, "he'll be where he belongs, behind bars." The case quickly became the talk of the town, with headlines condemning the once respected man. Jeeler was tried and convicted, leaving the community horrified that such a man had been in their midst for so many years. Ruth was vindicated, her reputation restored, and most importantly, she was reunited with her beloved son. The moment she held him in her arms again, she wept tears of joy, planting kisses on his small face as he clung to her, unwilling to let go. Meanwhile, Enrique found his thoughts consumed by his son, eagerly anticipating their reunion. In his focus on his child, he had nearly forgotten about Cecilia. But Cecilia hadn't forgotten about him. Watching from a distance, her anger simmered until she could no longer stay silent. She approached him, her voice dripping with accusation. "What's going on? You're always preoccupied, talking about Ruth and her son. I want answers." Though Enrique couldn't see the fury etched on her face, he felt the searing intensity of her anger. In that moment, he knew the truth: he no longer wanted to be with her. The love he once felt had dissipated, replaced by the cold reality that Cecilia would never get along with his daughter. And with that realization, he knew their time together was over. Cecilia had become overbearing, convinced that she owned everything, but Enrique was ready to reclaim his life, free from her suffocating grip. "We need to have a serious conversation," Cecilia Enrique began, his voice heavy with the weight of his confession. "Ruth was my first love, the girl I thought I'd spend my life with. We went to music school together, but we broke up over something foolish. It wasn't until later that I found out she was pregnant. She had a son, Adamastor. That means I'm a father to 2 children now, Bea and Adamastor. Cecilia's face twisted with fury. Are you telling me that another child is going to live here too? I can't even handle the thought of having my own kids right now, and now you expect me to take on someone else's. Enrique sighed, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. You're not listening, Cecilia. Our romance was a whirlwind, intense and fleeting. But the passion burned out as quickly as it began. 2 years later, we're strangers sharing a roof. You can't stand Bea. And it's clear that we'll never change. Seeing Ruth again made me realize I still love her. Tomorrow I'll speak to the doctor about eye surgery. After that, we might need to go our separate ways. I'll leave you the apartment and the car, but you'll have to find a job and live like everyone else. Cecilia shot to her feet, her voice rising in anger. I'm your wife. Half of everything is mine. I've endured your insufferable daughter for 2 years. The least you can do is thank me. But I'm not sticking around to deal with this. I'm only 25. I have my whole life ahead of me. I'm not staying to take care of someone else's kids and a blind husband. Enrique's eyes hardened. Yes, Cecilia, now that I'm no longer convenient for you, I'm not good enough. Well, goodbye then. You won't have my support anymore. Realizing she had gone too far, Cecilia softened her tone, trying to backpedal. Let's not say things we'll regret. We're both upset. Let's wait until you're better before discussing this. Don't rush into surgery. If something goes wrong, I'll be here to take care of you. But her words felt hollow, insincere. Enrique turned away, his voice distant. I've said all I need to. I have to listen to the meeting recording from my assistant now. Cecilia stormed out of his office, her mind racing with anger and resentment. How am I supposed to live like this? I'll have to get a job. This isn't the life I signed up for. Just wait, Enrique, you'll remember me for a long time. Seeking solace, Enrique turned to Professor Ruth, who offered to accompany him as a friend through the difficult days ahead. Meanwhile, Marlene and Bea returned home from their activities, only to find the house in disarray. Expensive items were missing, and panic quickly set in. Marlene immediately called the police, her voice trembling. We've been robbed. Everything is upside down, the safe is open, the television is gone, and important documents are missing. She frantically called Enrique as well. Please hurry. I think we've been robbed. Enrique instructed Marlene to take Bea and lock themselves in her room until he arrived. Fearing the worst, he turned on the security camera feed and was horrified by what he saw. Cecilia and the driver Timodo were tearing through the house, greedily grabbing anything of value. Oblivious to the cameras, Cecilia shouted triumphantly, "See, dear, you'll remember me now." Timodo's face twisted in anger as he muttered, "We should have taken care of him back then. Now we'll live like kings. But why are the police coming? They've never come by here before." Panic surged through Cecilia as she shouted at Timodo, "Hurry up. Abba and Bea will be back any minute. We need to sell everything and get out of here before it's too late. We have to buy tickets to somewhere safe." Enrique was paralyzed with shock as he watched the betrayal unfold before his eyes. The police arrived swiftly, taking fingerprints and working quickly to apprehend the treacherous pair. As the reality of the situation sunk in, Enrique's daughter, with wide, confused eyes, clung to him. "Dad, I told you a long time ago that Cecilia didn't love us," she said, her voice tinged with both sadness and relief. "She's bad, and you didn't believe me. You'll throw her out now, won't you?" Enrique looked at his daughter with deep affection and sorrow, kissing her gently on the forehead. "You're growing up so fast, my princess. And yes, she won't be living with us anymore. But I want to introduce you to someone special. Do you remember the lady who visited us once? Her name is Ruth, and she has a son named Adamastor. He's your brother, and though it's a long story, you'll understand it better when you're older. I hope the two of you can get along well. As for Cecilia and Timothy, the police will make sure they face the consequences." His daughter, suddenly anxious, looked up at him and asked, "Dad, what did the doctor say? Will your eyes get better?" Enrique smiled reassuringly. "I'm having surgery on Monday. You and Marlene will stay together, and Adam Astor will be with you too. Ruth, your mother, will be with me at the hospital. Please listen to Marlene and be a good girl while I'm away." The police, following the clues, quickly tracked the lovers to Timodo's apartment. They stormed the place, capturing Cecilia and Timodo, who now faced a harsh sentence for their treacherous actions against Enrique. Panic consumed Cecilia as she found herself behind bars. The damp, gray walls of the prison, the filthy mattress, and the unappetizing food filled her with dread. The harsh reality of her new life hit her like a ton of bricks. She cried endlessly, berating herself. "Fool, idiot. Why didn't I just live in peace? What have I done? How did I let it come to this? I need to see Enrique, beg him for forgiveness. He's kind, maybe he'll forgive me." But as Cecilia spiraled into despair, Enrique was moving forward. He filed for divorce, leaving the legal intricacies to his lawyer, and focused on his upcoming surgery. Ruth remained steadfast by his side, offering support. Meanwhile, Marlene stayed home with the children. Initially, Adam Astor was shy and reserved, but Bea, with her lively spirit, quickly befriended him, and soon the two were inseparable. He began to feel at home, especially after school, visiting Enrique in the hospital whenever he could. The day of Enrique's surgery finally arrived. It was a success, and soon the bandages would be removed from his eyes. Everyone, from Marlene to Ruth, Bea, and Adam Astor, waited with bated breath for that moment. The air was thick with anticipation, hope, and the promise of a new beginning. During this trying period, Enrique, Ruth, Marlene, and the children grew closer than ever, forging bonds so strong that they truly became one big, happy family. Adam Astor, sensing his father's illness, made a conscious effort to be well-behaved and considerate, understanding that his father needed peace and rest. He found joy in the fun and memorable moments they shared with Marlene, making the best of a difficult situation. Finally, the day arrived when Enrique's bandages were to be removed. As the doctor carefully peeled them away, the light struck his eyes, causing him to close them instinctively as tears welled up and streamed down his cheeks. Slowly, hesitantly, he began to open his eyes, and to his overwhelming relief, he could see the world as it was before the darkness had engulfed him. The doctor, satisfied with the results, gave him the green light to prepare for discharge. As Enrique walked out of the office, a broad smile spread across his face. Seeing Ruth waiting in the hallway, he couldn't contain his joy. "Ruth," he exclaimed, his voice filled with emotion, "I knew you hadn't changed all these years. You've only grown more beautiful, the same lips, that long, flowing hair, those delicate eyelashes, and that familiar strand tucked behind your ear. Ruth, you are absolutely stunning. Finally, I can see you again, and I'll cherish every second I spend admiring you. I owe Marlene a lifetime of gratitude for playing our melody on the piano. It stirred something deep within me, something I thought I had lost. Ruth, I'm so incredibly happy you're back in my life. I'm ready to leave behind this business that I've regretted for so long. I've made more than enough money for our family to live comfortably for years. Let's live the way you always wanted, in love, in peace, enjoying each other and our beloved music. Do you remember those days?" Ruth's eyes filled with tears of joy as she embraced Enrique. "These are the words I've waited so long to hear from you. You have no idea how much it hurt when you chose money and business over our love and music. But of course I remember those days. I still love you, Enrique. Do you remember our first kiss? You played the Moonlight Sonata for me. And afterward, we spent the night searching for the Big Dipper in the night sky, kissing passionately. You wrapped me in your coat and held me close, shielding me from the rain. In that moment, I felt like the happiest person in the world. Do you believe me? Let's go home, everyone's waiting for us. When Bea saw her father walking confidently from the car, the realization that he could see again filled her with overwhelming joy. She ran towards him, shouting, "Hooray, Dad, you've recovered. I'm so happy. Let's hurry home, we made a cake for you. I'm sure you'll love it." Adamastor and I helped Marlene with it. Adamastor, still shy and unsure, hung back, hesitant to approach. They hadn't yet had much time to connect. Sensing this, Enrique encouraged Bea to run ahead while he approached the boy himself. "Hello, son," Enrique said gently, his voice filled with warmth. "Finally, I can see you properly. We do look alike, don't we? You can't deny that. Did your mother tell you that I'm your father? I feel such sadness for missing out on the first 9 years of your life. But now that we found each other, I want to be the father you deserve. Someone who's close to you, who loves you. I'd like that very much. Please know that I love you, son. I'll never hurt you, and I'll always support you in everything you do." Enrique extended his hand, and Adamastor, though initially hesitant, took it and felt the firm, reassuring squeeze. Enrique's voice softened as he continued, "I'm so happy you're with me now. And look," he added with a smile, "see how your mom is smiling." At that moment, it was clear that this new chapter in their lives was the beginning of something beautiful, a family united by love, healing, and the promise of a bright future together. Enrique pulled Adamastor into a warm embrace, holding the boy close. "Let's all live together as one big family," he said, his voice full of warmth and determination. "It looks like you've already made friends with Bea. She's your sister now, so always stay together and support each other throughout life. Now let's go to lunch." From that day forward, the life of Enrique Ferreira, once a wealthy and powerful businessman, underwent a profound transformation. He became a completely different man, shedding the trappings of his old life. He sold his successful business, which had once been the cornerstone of his identity, and devoted himself entirely to his family and his passion for music. Every morning, with great satisfaction, Enrique would sit at the piano, letting his fingers glide over the keys as he played his favorite melodies, many of which had been long forgotten. He even dusted off an old music notebook, rediscovering pieces that had once brought him so much joy. Ruth became his personal teacher, guiding him with patience and love, and she also began teaching the children. It was a perfect fit. Both Ruth and Enrique possessed an extraordinary natural talent for music. Their shared passion inspired them to take a bold step and open a private music school together. Their wedding was a modest affair, deliberately low-key. They didn't want the spotlight on their lives. They had no time for such things. Instead, they were content to spend their days in quiet admiration of one another, reveling in the deep connection they had rekindled. It was only now that Enrique realized how much of his life had been lived according to someone else's script. He had chosen a career that, in hindsight, felt cursed, a job that had consumed him, a marriage that had burdened him with regret. The only thing he didn't regret was his daughter, Bea, his shining light, and the one true joy that had kept him going all these years. Ruth, with her kind heart and love for children, quickly bonded with Bea. As a teacher, she naturally gravitated toward nurturing young minds, and she and Bea formed a close and loving relationship. Marlene, who had been worried she might lose her place in their lives, was quickly reassured by Enrique and Ruth. "Don't worry, Marlene," they told her. "Stay with us. You're no longer just an employee, you're part of our family. The children can't be without you." Even when it was just Bea, this house was never boring. And now, with 2 more kids, we all need to give them the attention they deserve. Meanwhile, Cecilia languished in custody, her once grand life reduced to the stark reality of awaiting trial. Days bled into weeks, and the suffocating confines of her cell slowly chipped away at her spirit. The vibrant, confident woman she once was began to wither under the weight of her despair. The dread of spending years in prison gnawed at her, a constant presence that kept her awake at night, twisting her thoughts into knots of fear and regret. Her physical health, once her pride, began to decline sharply. She grew gaunt, her skin losing its luster, turning pallid and lifeless. The overwhelming sense of hopelessness was a relentless force, leaving her a mere shadow of her former self. When she finally received word that Enrique was willing to see her, a spark of hope ignited within her. She clung to it desperately, almost leaping with joy at the thought that perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance for redemption. She envisioned their meeting as a turning point, a moment where she could plead her case and find a way out of the misery that had consumed her. But Enrique, now hardened by the betrayal and pain she had caused, was in no rush. He wanted Cecilia to fully grasp the gravity of her actions, to feel the consequences in a way that would etch the lesson deep into her soul. Forgiveness was not on his agenda, at least not yet. He had moved on, but he was determined that Cecilia would never again have the opportunity to deceive or manipulate anyone, especially not him. This chapter in his life would close on his terms with finality and resolve. When Enrique finally entered the negotiation room, he was struck by the sight before him. Cecilia, once so poised and full of life, was now a pitiful figure, thin, draped in a worn and shabby gown, her once lustrous hair now greasy and limp, clinging to the back of her head in a disheveled tuft. The transformation was shocking. She was barely recognizable, stripped of the confidence and defiance that had once defined her. Her eyes, hollow and filled with desperation, welled up with tears as soon as she saw him, and within moments she was sobbing openly, her face a mask of remorse and regret. "Forgive me, Enrique, if you can," she pleaded, her voice shaking with raw emotion. "I know I'm to blame for everything. I've lost everything, my dignity, my freedom, my life as I knew it. Please drop the charges. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in prison. I'll leave, I promise. I'll go to my mother's house and never return to your life again. Just forgive me. Please. I'm desperate." Enrique regarded her with a mixture of pity and stern resolve. "I hope this time in jail has taught you a valuable lesson," he said, his tone firm but devoid of malice. "You won't be so quick to steal what doesn't belong to you again, especially not from the person who took care of you and gave you everything you needed. And I hope you've learned that mistreating your next husband, if there ever is one, will lead you nowhere. Your plan failed, Cecilia. I see clearly now, both in the literal and figurative sense. Bea is thriving. She's blossoming under the care and love of Marlene, Ruth, and her brother, Adamastor. This was never about Bea. It was always about you, your selfishness, your greed, your inability to think beyond your own desires. I will drop the charges this time, but know this: if you ever show up in my life again, prison will be your next destination. I have the security camera recordings as evidence." Cecilia's tears fell faster, a torrent of sorrow and relief washing over her as she whispered, "Thank you, Enrique. You are a true human being, more than I ever deserved." Without another word, Enrique turned and left, knowing that he had done what was right, not out of revenge, but out of a need to finally put this painful chapter behind him and move forward with his life. And move forward he did. With Cecilia out of their lives, Enrique, Ruth, Marlene, and the children settled into a new rhythm, a life filled with peace, love, and a shared passion for music. Their music school flourished, quickly becoming one of the most sought-after institutions in the city. Parents eagerly enrolled their children, drawn to the nurturing and inspiring environment that Enrique and his family had created. Bea and Adamastor thrived in this new chapter of their lives. Bea remained devoted to the piano, her fingers dancing across the keys with a grace and emotion that moved all who listened. Adam, on the other hand, found his calling in the violin and drums, his natural talent evident in every note he played. Ruth, ever the creative spirit, poured her heart into composing original melodies and writing poetry, often leading the family in impromptu sing-alongs that filled their home with warmth and joy. Their home, once filled with tension and unspoken grievances, was now a place of harmony and laughter. The walls echoed with music, the sound of a family united by love and a shared passion. Enrique, who had once been haunted by loss and loneliness, now found himself surrounded by a family that truly cared for one another. The emptiness that had once plagued him was now a distant memory, replaced by a deep and abiding contentment that grew with each passing day. In the end, Enrique's life found the meaning he had always longed for: a life rich in love, music, and the joy of being surrounded by those who mattered most. The dark days were behind him, and as he looked forward to the future, he knew that he had finally found the peace and fulfillment he had been searching for all along. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. As you reflect on the story of Enrique, Ruth, Bea, and Adam Astor, ask yourself, what have you learned from their experiences? How do love, forgiveness, and the choices we make shape our lives? We encourage you to share one thing you've learned and how you plan to apply it in your own life in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you more powerful and inspiring stories.